Our story begins at a party where his girlfriend lost a game of truth or dare and had to call the person she regretted losing most. She asked the man on the line if he would give her a home if she got a divorce, leaving the room in stunned silence. Everyone expected Marcus to flip the table in a rage, but instead, he calmly slid the ring off his finger. Since they hadn't officially registered the marriage, he simply told her it wasn't too late to break up and walked away before she could say a word. As he left, he called his parents in the capital to tell them he was finally coming home to get married. His mother was overjoyed, reminding him that as the sole heir to the Jiang group, he should have taken over the family business years ago. She noted that he had insisted on gaining experience on his own, but they already had a perfect match waiting for him. Hearing his parents' relief, Marcus felt a wave of guilt and found his voice softening as he spoke to them. He agreed to all their arrangements, and they set the wedding for January 19th. His mother began rambling excitedly about him coming back early to meet his future bride, her eagerness making his head throb just a little. To be honest, he didn't care who he was marrying, so he interrupted to say he only wanted to return and help with the family business. He told her the marriage was just a formality and he would simply show up the day before the ceremony. Just as he hung up, the bedroom door swung open and his girlfriend, Bella, walked in with a confused frown. She asked him what wedding he was talking about, having overheard the very end of his conversation. Facing her confusion, Marcus calmly put his phone away and made up a quick excuse about being a best man for a friend. Bella's expression softened at the explanation, and she didn't press him for any more details. He left his phone on the table and headed into the bathroom, but as soon as the water started running, the device began buzzing incessantly. Eventually, he checked the screen and saw a message from a man named Simon. The message asked if Bella remembered her old promise and if she was actually planning to marry Marcus. His heart tightened as he scrolled up to see the message Bella had sent to Simon just 10 minutes earlier. She had reminded Simon that his 20th birthday was only 33 days away and asked if he remembered what he had promised her. Marcus set the phone back down and leaned against the sofa, lost in thought. Memories began to flood back to when he first returned to the country at 18 and enrolled in university. To enjoy a normal life, he had never told anyone about his wealthy background, not even during his senior year. During a campus gala, he had stepped in to play accompaniment for a roommate, which was when he first met Bella. She had been waiting at the door with a bright gaze and a bouquet of flowers, asking for his contact information. Being someone who appreciated a pretty face, he had agreed on the spot, and they soon began talking every day and coincidentally bumping into each other. By the third month, Bella confessed her feelings, and it seemed like a perfect first love. He saw no reason to refuse, and so they stayed together from the age of 21 all the way to 28. Over those 7 years, his family constantly pressured him to return for an arranged marriage, but he always chose her. However, whenever he brought up the topic of marriage, Bella would avoid it like the plague and change the subject immediately. At first, he thought she just wasn't ready, but eventually, he realized something was very wrong. The truth came out during a drunken gathering half a month ago. The person Bella truly loved was her childhood friend, Simon. Unfortunately for her, Simon only saw her as a friend, and her interest in Marcus had been a calculated move. She had only approached him because Simon was with someone else that night, and Marcus happened to look like Simon while playing the piano. She chose him out of spite and a need for comfort, while Simon spent the next few years dating dozens of other women. Every time Simon broke up with someone, Bella considered leaving Marcus to go to him, but Simon always found a new target before she could act. Her heartbreak only deepened as the cycle repeated itself over 7 long years. And so, they never broke up because Bella was still waiting for Simon to change his mind. She was holding on to a drunken joke Simon made years ago, that if they were both still single at 28, they should just settle for each other. She had asked him every single year if they should just settle down together, and now, Simon's 28th birthday was only 33 days away. Looking at the messages on Bella's phone, Marcus couldn't help but smile bitterly. Simon's birthday was the exact date Marcus had chosen to leave her and return home for his own wedding. When he saw Bella head into the study, he finally laid back in the dark, listening as she eventually crept back into the room. She placed her glowing phone on the nightstand and lay down beside him, the room falling into a long, heavy silence until her breathing became steady. Only then did Marcus reach out to check her phone one last time. The chat screen now showed 4 simple words, never forgotten. He could easily imagine her expression as she typed them, biting her lip, eyes fixed on the screen, pouring her entire heart into a single sentence. Imagine the scene. A woman carefully weighing every word, terrified her feelings might be discovered, yet equally terrified they might be ignored. This was a level of devotion she only ever reserved for Simon. A bitter smile played on Marcus's lips as he realized she was fully committed to that 28-year-old pact. He didn't sleep a wink that night, and as dawn broke, the sound of her getting ready finally pulled him from his thoughts. He opened his eyes and suggested she leave work early today, which earned him a confused look as she applied her skincare. When she asked why, he quietly reminded her that it was her birthday, a fact she had completely forgotten. Bella froze for a moment before nodding, her mind clearly too preoccupied with Simon to care about her own special day. Marcus felt a wave of complicated emotions, thinking of the months he had spent planning a surprise that no longer mattered. Bella didn't notice his internal struggle, simply telling him to keep things simple this year instead of the usual grand celebration. In previous years, he would have gone to the ends of the earth to make her happy, knowing she had never truly valued his efforts. His voice took on a hint of self-mockery as he explained that the party was already organized and guests had confirmed. To be honest, it was far too late to cancel now. He had started these preparations 3 months ago, back when he still believed in their future. Bella said nothing more, simply grabbing her phone and leaving the room, though Marcus caught a glimpse of her frowning as she turned away. Once he reached the office, his first stop was the manager's room to hand in his resignation. When he walked back out with the paperwork in hand, his colleagues were naturally curious about his sudden departure. One coworker joked that he must be leaving to inherit a billion-dollar fortune, which, ironically, wasn't far from the truth. Marcus just laughed it off, telling them he was leaving to get married, much to everyone's surprise. A close friend asked if Bella had finally come to her senses and agreed to marry him, but Marcus didn't bother correcting him. He simply thanked them for their support over the years and promised to treat them to dinner later. After a 2-hour farewell meal with his colleagues, Marcus arrived at the hotel for Bella's party at 8 o'clock. He was about to push open the door to the private room when a conversation inside made him pause. Someone asked who Bella had rushed off to pick up in such cold weather, and the answer was exactly who Marcus expected: Simon. Apparently, Simon was returning today, and Bella had practically run out to meet him. The guests gossiped about how Simon was single again and might actually fulfill the promise now that they were both 28. It seemed everyone in the room knew the score, except for the man standing in the hallway. They laughed about how Marcus had spent 7 years blindly loving Bella without even knowing who Simon was. To them, it was almost tragic, or perhaps just a very long, sad joke. The consensus was that if Simon wanted her, Marcus would be dumped instantly, and they blamed it on his lack of background. They figured he would be easy to get rid of since he had no powerful family to back him up. As Bella's friends, they decided they would handle the breakup for her, suggesting they could just give Marcus a car or a house to make him go away quietly. And that, as it turned out, was how they viewed 7 years of devotion. Marcus didn't feel the same crushing grief he had felt weeks ago. Instead, he found it almost laughable that Bella needed her friends to dismiss him after 7 years. What kind of relationship had this been, really? Fortunately, this time, he was the one leaving first. As he stood outside, a few waiters pushed a drink cart past, forcing him to step back. The door swung open, and the gossip inside stopped instantly. Marcus walked in with a practiced smile, greeting everyone as if nothing had happened, just as Bella entered with a stranger. Marcus quietly observed the man, Simon, noting they shared a slight resemblance. Bella paraded him around the room before finally stopping in front of Marcus to introduce her childhood friend. After a brief hesitation, she introduced Marcus simply as her ordinary friend. She clearly expected him to be angry, but to her surprise, he didn't react at all. He merely looked at her deeply, then stepped back to maintain a polite distance with a perfectly composed smile. "Hello, Simon," he said. "I'm Bella's ordinary friend." With the introductions over, the room buzzed back to life. Simon was outgoing and charming, drifting from group to group with a drink in hand, eventually leading everyone in games. When Simon's hands were full with cards, Bella didn't hesitate to feed him watermelon with her own fork. Later, she sat clutching the very glass Simon had just used, drinking from it repeatedly. She was drinking from the exact spot his lips had touched. By the time the birthday song began, she was visibly tipsy, and Marcus stepped forward to present the cake. Looking at the 28-foot candles, Bella rubbed her temples to clear the fog of alcohol. Her wandering gaze finally settled on Simon, and she raised a single finger to make a request. Instead of a wish, she wanted to ask a question. Her eyes, though blurred by drink, were burning with an intensity directed solely at Simon. "Simon," she began, "you're almost 28 too." The room went silent as she asked if he had a girlfriend. The onlookers exchanged knowing glances while Simon, blinking under the collective scrutiny, admitted he was currently single. A brief silence was broken by a surprised cheer, and the room erupted. Bella's friends, equally drunk, began teasing and pushing the two of them together in a chaotic display. Throughout the madness, Marcus remained seated, perfectly still. He played his role as the clueless friend with calm detachment until the party finally wound down in the early hours. After everyone left, Marcus helped the sobbing Bella into a car. She collapsed into his arms, pouring out her heart, begging Simon not to leave her again. She cried about how many years she had spent waiting for him, wondering why everyone else could be happy while she couldn't. The driver, hearing everything, couldn't help but chuckle. As they reached their destination, the driver remarked on how much his girlfriend loved him. Marcus just smiled faintly. "She loves Simon," he replied, "but I am not Simon." The next morning, a hungover Bella immediately began making excuses. She claimed she had been forced to drink too much and had likely said a lot of nonsense she didn't mean. Marcus was surprised she remembered the night at all, yet he calmly played along with her clumsy lie. "It's fine," he said with a nod, "I understand." Something about his calm, expressionless face made Bella feel strangely uneasy. Sensing something was wrong, she quickly changed the subject, asking if he was upset about being ignored at the party. Bella tried to soften the mood, suggesting a date after work, but Marcus simply told her he was busy. Seeing his flat refusal, she became even more insistent on making it up to him, and eventually, he gave in. That evening, just as Marcus was dressing to head out, a message arrived from his friend Ryan. Ryan asked if Marcus had told Bella about resigning, as she had just shown up at the office looking quite angry. Before he could even finish reading, Bella's name flashed on his screen. With a heavy heart, Marcus answered the call, only to be met with her frantic voice demanding to know why his colleagues said he was quitting to get married. As Marcus searched for an explanation, Bella continued her cold lecture, reminding him she had no intention of marrying yet. It was then he realized she thought this was all a desperate ploy to force her hand. He patiently explained that the marriage talk was just a joke his colleagues took seriously, and that he simply needed a rest. As he spoke, her voice finally returned to its normal, composed tone. She warned him never to make such jokes again before asking where he was so she could join him. Marcus was about to give the address when he caught a faint, familiar laugh in the background. It sounded exactly like Simon. The yes he intended to say turned into a quiet "don't bother," and the call ended abruptly. Looking at the dark screen, he smiled bitterly. If she truly wanted to see him, she wouldn't have hung up so fast. It was just a hollow gesture, a performance he had mistakenly taken for genuine concern. He hailed a taxi and arrived at the restaurant alone, where the waiter greeted him with a respectful bow. The waiter explained that Bella had called 10 minutes ago to say she had an emergency and that he should start dinner without her. Marcus felt a wave of recognition wash over him at the mention of that word. The emergency, we can assume, was likely Simon needing her company once again. To her, even the smallest matter involving her true love was a crisis, so Marcus didn't dwell on it and headed to the private room. The waiter began setting the table, enthusiastically introducing a spread consisting entirely of seafood. Marcus looked at the dishes and felt a pang of exhaustion. After years in Europe, he had grown quite tired of seafood. In the past, he would have quietly endured it to please her, but today, he had no desire to sacrifice his own comfort. With a simple wave of his hand, he told the waiter to take it all away. The waiter hesitated, noting that the meal was already paid for and very expensive, but Marcus simply pulled out his own card. He knew the cost, but he insisted on ordering something he actually wanted to eat. By the time he finished his meal, Bella was still a no-show, so he paid the bill and headed home. Halfway there, his phone buzzed with a series of messages from her, asking if he could stay somewhere else for the night. She claimed Simon had returned unexpectedly and his family home wasn't ready, leaving him cold and unwell. She wanted Simon to stay at their place for the night so she could look after him. It was quite the balancing act, caring for Simon while hiding her relationship with Marcus. This time, Marcus wasn't in the mood to play his part, and he asked her directly why she felt the need to keep them a secret. He asked how long she intended to keep up the charade, but Bella offered no explanation, replying only with a date, January 18th. Once, he wouldn't have understood the significance, but now, the truth was clear. January 18th was Simon's birthday. If Simon chose to be with her that day, she would leave Marcus without a second thought. If not, she would settle for Marcus and finally agree to marriage. One has to admire the cold calculation of using a date to decide a man's fate. Unfortunately for her, Marcus was no longer willing to be the backup plan in her romantic games. He didn't bother replying, choosing instead to turn off his phone and check into a hotel. After a few drinks and a long sleep, he woke the next afternoon to find dozens of new messages waiting for him. Most of them were from Bella, though a few came from her circle of friends, all asking where he was, why he wasn't answering, and telling him not to scare her like that. Marcus let out a cold laugh at the accusatory tone. Apparently, turning off his phone for a night's sleep was now considered a threat. He knew they all saw Simon as Bella's priority. Just then, Bella called again, her voice sharp as she insisted Simon was only staying for one night and accused Marcus of overreacting just to vent his frustrations. He didn't feel like explaining, so he simply claimed his phone had died. Normally, Bella would have believed him, but today she seemed unusually suspicious and questioned his excuse. As he listened to her interrogation, Marcus found himself drifting back through years of memories. He remembered a late night years ago when Bella had called him by mistake while in pain. He had rushed to bring her medicine without a second thought, or the time she called from a business trip at 4 a.m., forgetting the time difference, and he stayed up to help her. Even after his appendix surgery 3 months ago, while still groggy from anesthesia, he had arranged for a nurse to get her the milk tea she suddenly craved. Every little thing was proof. It was proof of how deeply he had loved her, though she never seemed to notice. With a touch of self-mockery, he told her he only kept his phone on so he'd be there if she needed him. The hollow tone in his voice gave Bella pause. For 7 years, Marcus had been the steady one, never arguing or demanding explanations, even when things felt incredibly one-sided. If he ever got upset, a small gesture was enough to soothe him, as he always prioritized her comfort. Deep down, Bella had to admit that Marcus was a nearly perfect boyfriend. Her voice softened as she apologized, claiming she was only harsh because she had been worried. She asked for his location so she could come to him, but Marcus wasn't interested. He told her not to bother and took a taxi home, only to find she had already left again. He didn't need to guess where. The scent of expensive men's cologne in the air said enough. He quietly asked the housekeeper to open the windows for some fresh air. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus didn't see Bella at all, and he lived as if he had forgotten she even existed. He followed Simon's social media and knew exactly where she was, but he felt no urge to ask. To him, every day was now just a countdown, and he wouldn't waste energy on a goodbye. On New Year's Eve, as snow began to fall, he spent a quiet evening watching movies by the window. Around midnight, amidst the distant sound of fireworks, he heard footsteps at the door. He sat up just as a heavily intoxicated Bella stumbled into the room. She tossed a pile of shopping bags onto the sofa and began opening them one by one right in front of him. She pulled out 2 scarves, asking if he was cold, and then presented a Rolex she had bought as a New Year's gift. She kept babbling, trying to push the presents into his hands. Marcus unwound the scarf, feeling stifled, while Bella grabbed his hand to apologize for being too busy lately. She asked if he was still angry about her standing him up last time. She begged for his forgiveness, leaning in for a kiss that Marcus quickly avoided, unable to stand the smell of alcohol. He eventually managed to lead her into the bedroom to sleep. After she fell asleep, he tidied the living room and checked his phone. His feed was full of New Year's posts, but the one that caught his eye was Simon's, a gallery of photos with a woman. We see a photo of them in the snow with a caption that's quite telling. Meeting the right person during the first snowfall. Seeing this, Marcus felt every lingering doubt vanish instantly. It explained why Bella had come home drunk and tried to make amends. Her true love had simply started a new relationship. To be honest, he was only a backup for when she felt lonely. Over the next few days, Bella seemed like a different person, staying home to care for Marcus and even cooking porridge when his stomach hurt. She was suddenly the perfect partner. When she saw him glancing at travel ads, she immediately began planning a trip for them after the new year. Marcus watched her play this role of a devoted girlfriend with complete detachment. He felt no guilt watching her work so hard to please him. He viewed her sudden kindness as a late payment for years of emotional debt. After the snow stopped, his mother sent him suit designs. He zoomed in on the details of the wedding suits, so focused that he didn't hear Bella sneak up behind him. She snatched the phone away, and Marcus turned to find her expression darkening. She demanded to know why he was looking at groom's attire. Without blinking, Marcus lied, claiming a friend's wedding suit had fallen through, and he was simply helping him choose a new one. Seeing his calm expression, Bella's suspicion slowly faded as she handed back the phone. She even asked for the date, offering to accompany him to the wedding as his +1. Marcus gave her a subtle, knowing look and told her the date was January 19th. Bella froze at the mention of the day, and Marcus waited patiently for a response that he already anticipated. After a long silence, she forced a strained smile and told him they would see when the time came. From that moment on, she drifted back into a daze, clearly preoccupied with her own thoughts. Using the wedding as a convenient excuse, Marcus began packing his bags right in front of her. He had lived in this riverside apartment for 6 years, and his belongings filled every corner. He only packed what he had bought himself, leaving the rest behind. After all, once he returned to the capital, he could buy whatever he needed. Occasionally, Bella would glance at his suitcases. However, she never asked a single question. We see that she was far too focused on waiting for Simon's birthday invitation to notice Marcus quietly discarding his personal items. As long as their old couple's trinkets remained on display, she would never suspect he was leaving forever. In her eyes, he loved her far too much to ever actually walk away. On the morning of January 18th, under a gloomy sky, Bella sat on the sofa staring intensely at her phone. Marcus ate his breakfast calmly while the housekeeper noted the approaching rain. The housekeeper suggested leaving for the airport early, which caught Bella's attention. Marcus casually explained he was heading to the wedding and asked if she had decided to join him. Bella remained silent for a few seconds before declining, claiming it was too far, though she offered to drive him to the airport. Marcus wasn't surprised. He simply finished his toast and grabbed his bags. Just as Bella buckled her seatbelt in the car, her phone chimed. Her cold eyes immediately lit up with a joy she couldn't hide, and she instantly unbuckled her belt to get out. She leaned back into the car to explain that a sudden emergency had come up at work. She told Marcus she would have the driver take him to the airport instead. After so many years together, Marcus could easily tell she was lying by the way her eyes flickered. He didn't expose her. He just nodded and opened his social media while waiting for the driver. Sure enough, Marcus scrolled and found Simon's birthday photos. The young girl was nowhere to be seen, suggesting another breakup. It seemed Simon's old promise to marry Bella if he was still single at 28 was back on the table. No wonder she was so thrilled. When the driver arrived, Bella emerged in a stunning white evening gown, looking radiant as she hopped into her sports car. She waved at him through the window, asking when he would be back. Marcus simply smiled without answering, and Bella, too preoccupied to notice his silence, sped away. He watched her car vanish from sight before quietly telling the driver it was time to go. A light rain began to fall, blurring the world outside the window. Marcus didn't care to look. He closed his eyes and whispered a final goodbye in his heart. Before boarding his flight, he received a call from his father. His father asked what time he would arrive so a driver could meet him. Marcus, eager to be home, didn't refuse. Having slept poorly the night before, he drifted off almost as soon as the plane took off. 2 hours later, we see him walking out of the gate in a hat and sunglasses, only to be stopped by a crisp, clear voice calling his name. Still groggy, Marcus nodded. The girl explained that his Uncle George had sent her to pick him up. Marcus squinted at This girl, Luna, wondering why the driver was such a beautiful young woman. He leaned against the window and fell back asleep, only to wake up in front of a strange villa. Confused by the unfamiliar surroundings, he asked if this was home. Luna gave him a gentle smile and told him it wasn't his home yet, but it would be tomorrow. It was, in fact, his new wedding house. This revelation jolted Marcus wide awake. He quickly pulled off his hat and sunglasses, looking down to find Luna watching him with sparkling, mischievous eyes. Seeing his shock, she realized the confusion and reached out her hand, introducing herself properly as his fiancée. Marcus felt a wave of awkwardness and quickly shook her hand, his voice trailing off as he apologized for being half asleep and failing to recognize her. Luna just laughed, her voice light and airy, telling him not to worry about it. She noted that they would have plenty of time to get to know each other in the future. Meanwhile, across the city, Bella stood outside a private lounge, meticulously smoothing every wrinkle in her dress. Her phone buzzed with a message from the driver saying Marcus had boarded his flight. After a moment of hesitation, she sent him a text asking him to let her know when he arrived safely. Then, taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. Her eyes immediately locked onto Simon, the man she had dreamed of for years. Her heart raced as she walked toward him. Through the crowd, she overheard some friends teasing Simon about a surprise he was hiding. Simon told them not to rush. He promised to reveal everything when it was time to make his birthday wish. Hearing this, Bella thought back to her own birthday a month ago, and a flicker of intense hope rose in her eyes. She wondered if the joke they made when they were 16 was finally coming true today. For the next few hours, she could think of nothing else, nervously sipping her wine until the cake was finally brought out. Her hands were trembling slightly as her close friends gathered around her, their eyes full of knowing smirks. They whispered, asking how it felt to have her dream finally within reach. Bella just looked down, smiling silently. One of her friends, Sarah, leaned in and rested a hand on Bella's shoulder, suddenly remembering something. She asked what would happen to Marcus if things actually worked out with Simon tonight. Hearing Marcus's name in the middle of Simon's party caused Bella's smile to vanish instantly, replaced by a sudden pang of guilt. Her friends, noticing her change in mood, quickly began to reassure her that it was fine. Under their persistent urging, Bella pulled out her phone and typed a few words, but her finger hovered indecisively over the send button. Seeing her hesitate, her friends grew impatient and forced her hand down to press it. Her message asked if he was there yet, but right below it, a new message appeared. Let's break up. There was a 3-hour gap between them. Marcus's plane had landed, and he knew she would see his message very soon. While Bella was still hesitating over her phone, her friends pulled her to the center of the room. Amidst the birthday songs, Simon clasped his hands together and made a sincere wish for his 28th year. He wished for everything to go his way and to make next year's wish with Luna. Bella's smile vanished, her face turning pale, while the rest of the guests looked on in shock, wondering who this Luna could be. A slight blush crept onto Simon's face as he announced she was his new girlfriend. Just then, the door swung open and a beautiful young woman walked in, offering a graceful smile to the entire room. She introduced herself as Luna, Simon's girlfriend. As Simon happily shared details of their romance, Bella sat in the corner, drowning her sorrows in glass after glass of wine with her friends. Eventually, the alcohol took hold. Sarah stood up unsteadily and marched over to Simon, demanding to know if he had forgotten the promise he made to Bella all those years ago. Luna looked curious, asking what promise they were talking about. Simon's expression turned incredibly grim, but a drunken Sarah didn't care, and the other friends quickly stepped in to back her up. They reminded him that he promised to be with Bella when he turned 28. Luna's smile slowly faded as she turned to give Simon a long, searching look, asking if it was true. Simon dismissed it as a drunken joke that shouldn't be taken seriously, pointing out that he was no longer single. Each word felt like a knife twisting in Bella's heart. Clutching her chest in pain, she forced herself to stand and began to laugh hysterically. She told everyone that it was indeed just a joke, and that since he had a girlfriend, she had a boyfriend too. This seemed to ease the tension for Luna, who smiled and led Simon over to Bella. She acted as if nothing had happened, noting that she'd heard Bella had a boyfriend and wondered why he wasn't there. Bella struggled to meet her gaze, claiming he was busy attending a wedding. To be honest, it was a desperate lie, but she had to say something to save face in front of the crowd. Luna nodded understandingly, but Simon's eyes flashed with disbelief. He demanded to know who this boyfriend was, claiming he had never heard her mention anyone since his return. Looking at Simon's face, Bella found herself unable to speak. Sarah quickly stepped in to support her, spitefully telling Simon that Marcus was the boyfriend, the handsome guy from the birthday party. Simon recalled the night Marcus had claimed they were just ordinary friends. Sensing something was off, he pointed out that both of them had denied being a couple that evening. Sarah scoffed, calling it a simple lover's quarrel and mocking Simon for not understanding relationships despite his history. Simon's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger. Unable to let the insult go, he suggested calling Marcus right then and there to meet the new brother-in-law. At that suggestion, Bella and her friends felt their hearts sink. They all remembered the breakup text Marcus had sent. Seeing their panicked expressions, Simon felt certain he was right and immediately pulled out his phone to call Marcus on speaker. The women tried to grab the phone to stop him, but Luna stepped in to protect Simon. He turned the volume to the maximum, and the room fell silent, filled only by the sound of the ringing phone. Bella clenched her fists, praying silently that Marcus wouldn't answer or that he hadn't seen her message yet. The ringing continued for a full, agonizing minute. Just as the call was about to disconnect and the crowd began to lose interest, the line went live. Marcus's voice asked Simon what he wanted, and Bella's face instantly turned ashen. In sharp contrast to the tension, Simon wore a smile of pure mischief. He told Marcus it was his birthday, and, having heard Marcus was Bella's boyfriend, invited him to join the party. The line went quiet for a few agonizing seconds. Bella was so nervous she could barely breathe. Marcus finally replied, apologizing and explaining he was in the capital and couldn't make it. Hearing his calm tone, Bella hoped he hadn't seen her earlier message, but he wasn't finished yet. With a meaningful hum and a hint of a laugh, Marcus added that he and Bella had already broken up, so Simon shouldn't misunderstand. Simon was surprised, but mostly he was delighted by the turn of events, asking exactly when this happened. Marcus noted it had only been about 10 minutes since he sent the breakup text. Around the room, the guests struggled to hide their amusement, while Simon's face practically glowed with satisfaction as he glanced coldly at the embarrassed young women. Simon softly promised to pass on the message, thanking Marcus for his time. Marcus wished him a happy 28th birthday and added a blessing for true lovers to end up together. Whether it was intentional or not, we can't be sure. However, Marcus emphasized the words 28 so heavily that it seemed he knew exactly what was going on. No one dared to speak as the call ended. The atmosphere in the room plummeted to sub-zero temperatures instantly. A heavy silence lingered for several minutes until Luna finally stepped in to play peacemaker. She offered Bella a toast to smooth things over. Bella drained every last drop of her drink, her expression unreadable as she processed the humiliation. She slammed her glass down and marched out of the party with her friends in tow. As she reached the door, Bella caught a fragment of a conversation between Luna and another guest, asking if this Marcus was from the capital city. Luna mentioned the name sounded familiar, but dismissed it as a stray thought. Once they were outside, Bella's friends hurried her into a private lounge, immediately launching into a chorus of frantic comfort to soothe her wounded pride. They told Bella she was better off not marrying a man like Simon, pointing out that his long list of ex-girlfriends would fill 10 banquet tables. A player, like him, they claimed, would only bring trouble if she actually married him. They urged her to stay with Marcus instead, insisting he was better than Simon in every way. They assumed Marcus was just acting out of anger and told Bella she simply needed to go back and explain everything to him. With her friends acting as her emotional support, Bella's spirits began to steady. She pulled out her phone and spent a long time carefully crafting a message to Marcus, trying to find the right words to fix the damage. She wrote that the breakup was just a punishment for losing a game with her friends, a test to see his reaction. She told him not to take it seriously, then asked how things were going in the capital and if he was busy with the wedding. She asked if he was coming back tomorrow or the day after, even offering to pick him up. After she hit send, the minutes ticked by without a reply. Bella stared at the screen, her heart racing with a growing sense of dread. Her friends noticed her panic and quickly tried to distract her, suggesting that a wedding must be incredibly busy. They told her not to overthink it, promising that if he was still angry tomorrow, they would all go to the capital to apologize in person. Back in the capital, Marcus was helping Sophie with her wedding dress when Bella's message arrived. When he read that first line about it being a game, he couldn't help but let out a short, dry laugh at the absurdity of it all. He had to admit, her ability to invent such a creative excuse on the fly was impressive. Unfortunately for her, he didn't believe a single word of it. He could easily imagine the scene of her being rejected by Simon and crawling back to him. Thinking back to that strange phone call, he suspected the reality was even more dramatic than he imagined. He felt a brief, ironic pang of regret for missing the show. Sophie, noticing his sigh as she adjusted her gown, asked if something was wrong. She wondered if he didn't like the dress and offered to order a new one. Marcus told her it wasn't that. He was just sad to miss a good show because of the wedding. Sophie was curious, but Marcus knew better than to talk about an ex-girlfriend now. He quickly changed the subject, claiming it was just some birthday drama with old friends and nothing important. He suggested they focus on the wedding instead. Seeing he didn't want to elaborate, Sophie didn't push and headed toward the living room. Sophie brought over some desserts, asking if Marcus was hungry and suggesting he eat something while they finished up. He admitted he was famished, so he noted down what she wanted to eat and went to make arrangements. As he stepped out to order, Marcus found himself lost in thought over the information he'd gathered. Sophie was the third daughter of the capital's prestigious Miller Group, 2 years younger than him, with 2 older sisters. Her eldest sister, 5 years her senior, was the vice president of the Miller Group and had practically raised Sophie, ensuring she grew up with grace and poise. The 2 families had grown close over the years before suggesting this union. According to Marcus's mother, Sophie had agreed to the marriage the moment she saw his photo, seemingly very satisfied. Marcus wasn't so sure about that. He had simply returned home to help his family after his last relationship ended. To be honest, he hadn't taken this arranged marriage to heart, figuring they would either get along or eventually divorce. He doubted the love at first sight story, yet after an afternoon together, even if they weren't close, things felt different. We see that Marcus could sense his fiancée was a good person through the small details. Her beauty was undeniable, of course, but her temperament, at least for now, seemed remarkably gentle and kind. She was organized, thoughtful, and clearly understood the nuances of social grace. Overall, Marcus was satisfied with this unexpected fiancée, feeling a spark of surprise that his parents actually had such excellent taste. After a night of heavy drinking, the first thing Bella did upon waking was check her phone for a reply. When she saw the chat was still empty after 10 hours, she rubbed her eyes in frustration and hurled the phone against the wall. The crash startled everyone awake, and seeing her outburst, their lingering drunkenness vanished instantly. They assumed Marcus was just playing hard to get and told Bella not to worry, promising to go with her to win him back. The group hurried toward the airport to catch a flight to the capital. On the way, Bella stared out at the passing skyscrapers, feeling a deep sense of regret for how things had spiraled out of control. She told herself that if she had known it would end in such disappointment, she would have agreed to go to the capital yesterday. She felt increasingly lost, trying to convince herself that not going to the party would have been better. After hearing Simon's cold words, she felt her hope finally dying. For years, she had struggled to hold on, clinging to that age 28 pact, but being with Marcus at the same time had left her feeling utterly conflicted. She hadn't known how to face a boyfriend who was so devoted to her while her heart was elsewhere. Now, she felt it was time to make a final choice, tentatively asking her friends if she should try proposing marriage to Marcus. Her friends' eyes widened at the mention of marriage. They pointed out that given Marcus's family background, her parents would likely never agree. He was a nice man, they admitted, but perhaps not a proper match. They argued that while he was handsome and kind enough for dating, he wasn't truly worthy of her in a marriage. Despite their cold water, Bella didn't listen, leaning back in her seat as memories of her time with Marcus flooded back. She remembered how, after her 25th birthday, Marcus would drop hints about marriage every few months to test the waters. She knew exactly what he wanted and that his family was pressuring him to settle down. Yet, out of her own selfishness, she had always pretended not to understand his hints. Now that they were older and his feelings remained so deep, she didn't want to lose him, even if the road to marriage looked difficult. Bella finally resolved to propose in the capital. She messaged her assistant to buy a pair of wedding rings that had recently gone viral online, but just before boarding, the assistant reported they had already been sold. Bella was shocked to hear they had sold for a staggering $900 million. When she asked for the buyer's name, the assistant sent back a single word, Miller. It was the famous Miller family from the capital. The name carried immense weight in their circles, but since Bella had a connection with the second Miller daughter, she called to ask. The woman casually confirmed she had bought them for her sister's wedding that very day. I bought them as a wedding gift for the newlyweds, the second Miller sister explained. You've asked a bit too late, Bella. It seems Sophie is getting married today too. Everyone is choosing the same day. Bella's eyes flashed with surprise, but she carefully chose her words, thanking the woman politely. She claimed she'd simply forgotten she'd already seen them and asked the sister to pass on her congratulations to Sophie. She couldn't help but wonder which lucky man was marrying into the family. The sister replied that Sophie was marrying into the Miller family's equals, the Miller-Miller union. Hearing that name, Bella immediately thought of Marcus. She wondered if Marcus had any relatives or friends in the capital. A flurry of strange thoughts bubbled up in Bella's mind, but as she stepped out of the car, the biting winter wind blew them all away. She shook her head and rubbed her temples, pushing those messy ideas aside. How could a common boy from a small town have any connection to the prestigious Miller family? After the plane landed, Bella called Marcus. We see that Marcus still hadn't cooled off, surrounded by the noise of the crowd. His tone was far from friendly. Is there a reason my ex-girlfriend is calling me? He asked, his voice flat and distant. Hearing the title ex-girlfriend made Bella's blood pressure spike, but she knew now wasn't the time for a temper. She suppressed her anger and patiently explained that her words about breaking up were just a joke. Marcus wasn't buying it. Is that so? I don't care if it was a game. I only believe what I see. No need to explain. I'm busy and have no time for small talk. With that, he hung up immediately. Bella's face turned dark with rage at his attitude. Her friends took turns comforting her, suggesting she just speak softly when they met. Her expression finally softened as she told the driver to head to the Springs Villa. When the name Springs Villa was mentioned, the group shared a look of realization. This was a famous luxury district where the residents were all heavyweights. They wondered why Marcus's friend would hold a wedding here. Bella felt a drumbeat of anxiety in her heart as those earlier thoughts resurfaced. Could Marcus actually be a distant relative of the Millers? By 10:30, the wedding was about to begin, and guests were taking their seats. Marcus stood on the top-floor balcony, looking down. Sophie had planned this wedding herself, and it was clear she had put her heart into it. He realized his mother hadn't been exaggerating about the scale of the event. Logically, every prominent family in their circle would attend, but even with 700 or 800 tables, the venue felt massive. Despite the sun, the winter air was chilly, so they had prepared for the guests' comfort. Countless heaters were placed around the area, and the floral stands were decorated with fresh flowers flown in from Europe. Even the party favors were pure gold locks, one for every single guest in attendance. The sheer extravagance of the display made even Marcus, who had grown up abroad, feel a bit of a sting for the budget. As he straightened his hair, Sophie approached and suggested they head inside to escape the cold. He followed her inside, where she handed him a cup of hot coffee. She mentioned that someone had called asking for the wedding location and wondered if it was his friend. Marcus quickly checked his call logs. When he saw Bella's name, his expression became quite peculiar. "It's Bella. She's in the capital," he noted, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. He told Sophie not to worry about picking them up. They'd find their way. He noted the crowd was huge and spotted cameras on the nearby hills, suggesting they tightened security just in case. Sophie didn't think much of it and agreed, handing him the wedding rings before she left the room. Once Sophie was gone, Marcus finally let out the laugh he'd been holding back. He couldn't wait to see the look on Bella's face when she realized he was the one standing on that stage. He opened the ring box. As he looked at the rings inside, he froze for a moment. He had seen this exact pair in a magazine 2 months ago and shared them with Bella. Back then, he had imagined proposing to her with them. Life is funny that way. It had only been 2 weeks since he discovered her affair with Jacob. The wedding and the rings he had longed for were finally his. And to be honest, the change in bride was for the best. He felt no lingering nostalgia for the past 7 years, only a profound sense of relief. At 11 o'clock sharp, the ceremony began, and Marcus watched as Sophie's father led her to his side. The initial rites were completed smoothly, and soon it was time to exchange the rings. But just as Sophie reached for his hand, a sudden commotion erupted from the audience below. We see Bella pushing through the crowd like a woman possessed, her eyes locked onto the stage. Her friends followed close behind, shouting Marcus's name and drawing the attention of every guest in the room. Despite the judgmental whispers and curious stares, Marcus remained perfectly calm. He turned to Sophie, seeing her confusion and anger, and whispered a quick apology for the disruption. He asked if they could pause for a few minutes so he could deal with his friends from out of town. Sophie nodded hesitantly, and Marcus signaled the security guards to stop dragging the group away. From the very start, Bella's gaze never wavered from him. Seeing him standing there in his wedding suit, looking entirely unbothered, she finally lost the last of her composure. She demanded to know if the friend whose wedding he was attending was actually himself. Marcus couldn't help but find the irony amusing. Usually, that's exactly what people mean by that phrase. Bella's eyes burned with a fierce rage as she asked if this was his reason for marrying behind her back. But as we know, the Miller-Miller union had been trending online for over a month. The realization hit her like a physical blow, and she turned to look at the bride. Sophie's resemblance to her older sister was unmistakable, and Bella's entire body began to tremble with shock. The truth was written in her wide eyes. If Sophie was marrying Marcus, then who exactly was Marcus? Behind her, her friends gasped in disbelief as they finally connected the dots. Marcus watched them quietly before patiently introducing himself as the sole heir to the Miller family fortune. He was the son of the city's most powerful couple and Sophie's rightful husband. He asked if they had any further questions about his identity, a statement that left the group in stunned silence. In their home city, these women were influential, but here in the capital, they were outmatched. After a long silence, Bella asked in a hoarse voice why he had never told her the truth. Marcus simply pointed out that she had kept many secrets herself, including her 28-year agreement with another man. Those words turned Bella's face deathly pale, and she began to stammer out a desperate explanation. She claimed she had never truly forgotten Jacob, but that the last 7 years had been different. Before she could finish, Sophie, who had been observing the scene with quiet dignity, finally intervened. She calmly instructed the security team to escort the group out of the venue immediately. Sophie took Marcus's hand and gently suggested they finish the ceremony before dealing with his friends privately. She didn't want to keep their guests waiting, and Marcus was impressed by her decisiveness. Though he agreed and returned to the center of the stage, he still had many questions lingering in his mind. As the piano music resumed, the couple finally exchanged their vows amidst the cheers of the crowd. When the bouquet was thrown, petals and ribbons drifted down through the bright afternoon sun. Marcus turned his back on the past, choosing to look only toward the future he was building with Sophie. After the grand wedding concluded, Marcus felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. Reflecting on the day's chaos, he decided it was finally time for an honest, open conversation with his new wife. Marcus asked Sophie if she had any questions for him, and she paused while wiping her face. She looked at him and said that if he wanted to talk, she would listen, but if not, she wouldn't pry, a gentle attitude that took him by surprise. For the first time, he felt as though he had married someone truly extraordinary. He asked if she wasn't curious about his past or worried about the drama that unfolded, while Sophie settled into a nearby armchair with poise. Her eyes were calm as she admitted she was curious, but insisted it didn't matter compared to their successful wedding. She told him he was now her husband and they would face tomorrow together, though if he wished to share his past, she would be happy to listen, and if not, she understood. She noted there was no use dwelling on what couldn't be changed, and in that moment, Marcus realized just how different she was from the people he used to know. Moved by her words, he decided to be completely honest and explained that the group at the wedding included his ex-girlfriend and her friends. They had been together for 7 years, and he had truly intended to marry her until he discovered her heart belonged to someone else. After the breakup, he returned to the capital and agreed to his parents' push for marriage. He had only officially ended things with Bella yesterday, and since she had no idea he was a Miller, she had come to the wedding to cause a scene. As she listened, a subtle expression flickered across Sophie's face. She remarked that marrying the day after a breakup seemed a bit rushed, to which Marcus agreed, though he reminded her that as a business arrangement, they only needed to appear stable to the public. He spoke with such matter-of-fact conviction that Sophie couldn't help but smile. She asked if he really didn't care who his partner was or what she was like, and he admitted his only real focus was eventually taking over the Miller Group. Sophie's heart skipped a beat as she studied him for a long moment before nodding silently. Meanwhile, Bella was being dragged hundreds of meters by security, suffering a level of humiliation she had never known, and her friends fared no better. They were dumped at the villa gates, fuming but silent under the gaze of dozens of guards. Below the steps, however, were hundreds of reporters who, having been barred from the wedding, were desperate for any scoop they could find. A few sharp-eyed journalists recognized Bella immediately and rushed forward with their microphones. They shouted questions, asking if she had been invited to the Miller wedding and why she looked so disheveled. With one reporter leading the charge, the crowd swarmed her with flashing cameras. Bella, already at her breaking point, exploded in rage at being caught in such a pathetic state, shoving people aside and smashing several expensive cameras. She stormed away with her friends, but by that evening, the news of her attacking reporters was the top headline. The reputation of the White Group plummeted overnight as negative articles flooded the internet, and no amount of money could stop them. When Jacob called, Bella was locked in a hotel room, smelling strongly of alcohol. He asked if the rumors were true, if the man marrying into the Miller family was actually Marcus, the man they both knew. When she confirmed it, Jacob's voice took on a hint of excitement. He told her that his sister, Luna, had just informed him that the joint project between the four major families was finally moving forward. He explained that the final decision-making power for the project rested with the capital's elite. Since she had dated Marcus for 7 years, he wondered if she could ask him for a favor to secure the project for them. Though her mind was clouded by drink, Bella still had a shred of logic left. She laughed bitterly, asking why he would ever help her now that he was married to Sophie, but Jacob dismissed her concerns. He argued that after 7 years, Marcus was bound to have some lingering feelings and urged her to try. He mentioned her father was furious about the wedding scandal, and securing this project was the only way to appease him. Hearing this, Bella's resolve began to waver, though she only gave a vague answer before hanging up. She struggled to the bathroom to splash cold water on her face, trying to clear the fog from her mind. Minutes later, her friend Elena knocked and entered to discuss the project as well. Bella sat on the sofa, staring coldly out the window as her thoughts raced. She knew this project was a massive opportunity they couldn't afford to lose. We see that this project is a massive prize, with powerful factions from every major city fighting for a piece. The four families joined forces just to stand a chance, and according to the latest intel, the person in charge is likely none other than Marcus's own aunt, Sarah. If Bella could use him to bridge that gap, it would certainly make things easier. After a long silence, she decided to try, and not just for the sake of the business. She also planned to take over as vice president at the headquarters. To help her adjust quickly, her father had assigned her several of his most trusted secretaries and assistants to ensure a smooth transition. After spending the entire day buried in reports, she finally had a grasp of the company's internal affairs. By the time she looked up, it was already 8 o'clock, and hers was the only office still lit. "What are you doing here?" Sophie gave a soft, slightly helpless smile. She reminded him that since it was only their second day of marriage, they should technically still be on their wedding leave. Marcus then remembered the look she had given him when they left the registry office that morning. He finally understood what that expression meant. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he explained that since this was his first marriage, he lacked experience and had simply forgotten. He suggested that honeymoons were for ordinary couples, and since theirs was a business arrangement, there was no need to celebrate. A flicker of disappointment crossed Sophie's eyes, but she quickly composed herself and got into the car. She teased that even if they didn't celebrate, surely a busy man like him could spare time for dinner with his wife. Her playful tone made Marcus smile, and he joined her as they drove to a very famous French restaurant. They arrived late during the dinner rush, and with all the private rooms full, Marcus was too hungry to go elsewhere. With Sophie's consent, they took a corner table by the window, where she immediately handed him the menu. She recommended several signature dishes, and following her lead, he ordered a few things he liked before handing the menu back. To his surprise, Sophie didn't order anything else. He asked if she was sure, noting his taste could be a bit unusual. She shook her head, her eyes shimmering as she looked at him. She remarked that since they were husband and wife and would eat together every day, she wanted to try what he liked. Marcus replied that marriage wasn't a form of servitude, and she still had every right to choose her own food. He told her she didn't need to overthink things and could always speak her mind. She asked if that meant everything was negotiable, including the canceled honeymoon. Seeing her so serious, he had expected a much more difficult request. The mention of a honeymoon caught him off guard. He asked if she truly wanted to go that badly, and she explained that after the stress of the wedding, she needed a rest. Furthermore, she noted that both their families hoped they would grow closer quickly, and a honeymoon seemed like the perfect opportunity. Hearing her sincere tone, the excuses Marcus had prepared seemed to vanish into thin air. To be perfectly honest, Sophie was proving to be an excellent wife who respected his opinions. While a honeymoon meant little to him, he didn't want to hurt her feelings over something so small, so he agreed. Sophie's smile brightened instantly. She suggested she would handle the arrangements once his current busy streak ended. Meanwhile, Bella had been waiting outside the Miller group all day, eventually following them to the restaurant to find a moment alone. However, Marcus never left his seat all evening. The sight of him laughing and sharing food with Sophie stung Bella deeply. Though her own food sat before her for 2 hours, she didn't take a single bite, her eyes fixed on his warm smile. When Marcus finally got up to head to the restroom, Bella hurried after him and called out his name in the hallway. She demanded to know why he had agreed to marry Sophie. He turned around, a look of genuine surprise in his eyes. He reminded her quite coldly that they had already broken up, so his marriage was none of her business. This indifferent tone made Bella feel utterly dismissed, and a surge of anger rose within her. She pointed out that the marriage had been arranged over a month ago, while they were still together, meaning he had already found her replacement. Marcus crossed his arms and looked at her calmly, admitting he had planned his return to the capital long ago. Marcus asked her if it was wrong to plan his own future a month in advance, since she had spent 7 years planning to dump him on his birthday. His words left Bella speechless, her fists clenched as she struggled to swallow her rising resentment. She tried to defend herself, claiming things with her ex weren't what they seemed. She insisted she knew he didn't love her, but after so many years and an old promise, it had simply become an obsession she couldn't let go of. She claimed she truly wanted to be with Marcus and had even picked out an engagement ring before coming to the capital. She begged him to believe her just this once, but we can see that her pleas were falling on deaf ears. Marcus mocked her, suggesting she only remembered him as a backup plan because she had been rejected. He told her to go propose to her ex instead, his voice dripping with a sarcasm that made Bella's heart ache with growing pain. She stepped forward to grab his hand, but he pulled away. To be honest, he realized he had never truly known her until that birthday party, and any affection he once felt had completely vanished after seeing her true colors. He admitted that he used to think she had a shred of sincerity despite her double dealing, but now her words only made him feel sick. He pointed out that she hated being treated as a backup, yet she had done the exact same thing to him. He asked if she felt her 7 years of devotion were so touching that she had moved even herself. He then forced her to realize that, at her core, she was no different from the man who had strung her along all those years. He told her they were two of a kind, and there was no need to act out a drama of regret in front of him. Bella's face turned deathly pale as the blood drained from her cheeks, but Marcus didn't care about her feelings anymore. He turned to walk back to the hall, wanting to end the confrontation. As they brushed past each other, Bella couldn't help but grab his arm, causing Marcus to lose the last of his patience and roughly shake her off. At that exact moment, an old, poorly maintained chandelier above them gave a sharp creak and began to fall. It was heading straight for Marcus's head, and in that split second of danger, Bella instinctively moved to shield him. Marcus turned back just in time to see the aftermath of the crash. He looked down and saw Bella collapsed on the floor, the heavy fixture having struck her instead of him. She was curled in a ball of agony, clutching her right shoulder as her face turned flushed from the intense pain. Waiters rushed over to check on her injuries, while Sophie hurried to Marcus's side with a worried frown. After confirming Marcus wasn't hurt, Sophie breathed a sigh of relief and led him away from the scene. Watching their retreating figures, Bella bit her lip to stay silent, but she couldn't stop the sob rising in her throat. She closed her eyes in despair as memories of Marcus flooded her mind. She remembered how he had stayed by her side when she was ill, contacting every doctor he could find and never leaving her bed for a moment. She recalled how he used to soothe her bruises and stay awake through her insomnia just to play music for her. Back then, he cared about every little detail of her life. But now, even though she was injured saving him, he felt nothing. He had walked away without a second glance. At this moment, Bella finally accepted that the man she knew was gone. He no longer belonged to her, and he certainly didn't love her anymore. A little later, they arrived home. Marcus's heart finally began to settle as he sat on the sofa with some hot tea, still a bit shaken by the accident. He turned to say something to Sophie, only to find her kneeling beside him with a first aid kit. He asked why she brought the kit since he wasn't the one who got hit. Sophie didn't say a word at first, simply pointing toward his ankle. Following her gaze, he realized a stray piece of glass had scratched his heel. Sophie picked up a cotton swab with alcohol, warning him it might sting. Marcus felt a bit embarrassed that she was making such a fuss over a tiny scratch, telling her it was nothing and would heal on its own. Despite his words, he hissed through his teeth the moment the alcohol touched the cut. After bandaging him, Sophie insisted on ordering waterproof covers, telling him he needed to be careful when he showered for the next few days. Sophie reminded him to be careful and keep the wound dry, even suggesting he wear slippers if he had to go out. Having lived alone since childhood, Marcus realized this was the first time someone had fussed over him like this. He felt a bit overwhelmed by her making such a big deal out of a tiny scratch. To ease the tension, he joked that the wound might be healed before the waterproof covers even arrived, but Sophie just stared at him intently. Her expression was unusually serious as she told him his injury was her responsibility due to her oversight. She didn't want him to suffer any more discomfort after such a shock, which is why she was being so thorough. She admitted she was being a bit talkative, but insisted there was no harm in being cautious. Whether it was her sincerity or the flash of guilt in her eyes, Marcus felt a strange tug at his heartstrings. His heart fluttered, and unable to meet her gaze, he simply nodded. After Sophie left with the medical kit, Marcus received a call from Bella's friend, Chloe, who demanded to know how he could be so heartless. Chloe accused him of not visiting Bella after she was seriously injured saving him. Not wanting to be the villain in her story, Marcus scoffed, pointing out that the chandelier only fell because Bella wouldn't stop grabbing him. He told her Bella's injury was her own doing and shouldn't be blamed on him. Chloe countered that regardless of the cause, Bella had pushed him out of the way at a critical moment, asking if he had any feelings left at all. He was almost impressed by her ability to twist the truth, but he was tired of the drama. Glancing at the bandage on his ankle, he told a small lie, claiming he couldn't visit because he was also injured and couldn't walk. The phone went silent for a few seconds before Chloe's tone softened. She said if he couldn't come, he should at least settle the debt of gratitude by sending over a few invitations to the upcoming Cloud Project Gala. So, that was the real plan all along. Marcus chuckled at the audacity and agreed to the request before hanging up and messaging his aunt to ask for the details of the project and the invitations. Over the next few days, Sophie followed Marcus everywhere he went. At first, he tried to tell her to focus on her own work, but she repeatedly used their upcoming marriage as an excuse to stay by his side. Eventually, he realized that having Sophie around was quite helpful, as she always had insightful advice for any work problem. As they spent every moment together, the two of them quickly grew much closer. When he worked late, Sophie would sit quietly nearby with her laptop. She kept him updated on her schedule and even took him on dates to explore interesting new places, showing him a side of life he hadn't seen. 2 weeks later, during the Lunar New Year, the Miller and Sophie's families gathered to celebrate. With over a dozen people chatting and laughing, the conversation naturally turned toward the newlywed couple. Marcus's mother looked at them with pride, remarking that Marcus was just as stubborn as his aunt. She recalled how he insisted on staying away from home after graduation to make it on his own, despite her wishes. She jokingly told Sophie to be patient with him if he was difficult. Marcus felt a bit indignant at being teased in front of everyone, but before he could defend himself, Sophie placed a peeled orange in his hand. With a smile, Sophie told his mother that Marcus wasn't stubborn, but independent and decisive. She claimed she looked forward to learning from him, so she wouldn't fall behind as they took on the family responsibilities. Her words prompted the rest of the family to shower them with praise. Marcus's mother was beaming with joy, saying that as long as they were happy, the elders were happy, though a grandchild would be even better. The other elders joined in the teasing, causing Marcus's face and ears to turn bright red. Noticing his embarrassment, Sophie quickly made an excuse to lead him away into the quiet of the garden. The cold winter air helped Marcus's face return to its normal color. Sophie smiled and changed the subject, asking if he was attending the gala tomorrow, the very one he had sent invitations to Bella for. Sophie mentioned she needed to keep an eye on Bella to see what she was really up to, then asked if there was an extra invitation for her. Marcus looked up in surprise, noting that while the project was promising, she and her sister had been busy elsewhere lately. He teased her, asking if she was really trying to scout for information during such a busy season. Sophie blinked rapidly, laughing it off and explaining that it wasn't about the project at all. She simply wanted something to do during the holidays. She admitted she just wanted to spend time with him, and Marcus nodded, understanding her completely. Realizing he only had one invitation left, he took her downstairs to find his aunt. The gala was set for 7 o'clock at the city's largest hotel. The project manager eventually took the stage to officially open the evening. Marcus's aunt arrived 30 minutes late due to traffic, and the moment she stepped through the doors, she was swarmed by opportunistic guests hoping to catch her ear. Not wanting to get caught in that chaos, Marcus led Sophie away from the crowd to find some peace. Since they weren't there for business, they strolled leisurely through the hall, enjoying the fine food and wine like any other happy couple. Up on the second floor, Bella stood by the railing with a glass of champagne, her eyes landing instantly on Marcus, whispering to Sophie. Over the past month, she had tried to convince herself to move on, knowing Marcus's family and Sophie's were far beyond her reach. She had spent weeks building up her mental defenses, telling herself to face reality and let go of the past. But seeing them together now, looking so intimate and happy, that old resentment flared up again, and her expression darkened instantly. Beside her, Ryan noticed Marcus as well, his eyes lighting up as he led Chloe toward the stairs. Not wanting to be left behind, Bella followed them down, and soon the 4 of them were cutting through the crowd to intercept our couple. They stopped right in front of Marcus and Sophie, offering a somewhat stiff greeting and congratulating Sophie on her recent marriage. Sophie offered a polite, 2-word thanks, and the atmosphere immediately turned ice cold. Chloe felt the tension and signaled Ryan to step in, who waved at Marcus with forced familiarity, asking if he remembered their meeting 2 months ago. Marcus acknowledged him coolly, and upon hearing his voice, Bella finally looked up. She met Marcus's indifferent gaze, her voice trembling slightly as she mentioned hearing about his injury and asking if he had recovered. Marcus replied that he was doing quite well, thanks to her, using a meaningful tone that made her flinch. A flash of guilt crossed Bella's face, and she opened her mouth to explain, but Sophie smoothly cut her off. Sophie noted that they were just there to accompany Marcus's aunt and hadn't expected to run into Chloe and the others here. She pointedly asked what brought them all the way to the city after 7 years, prompting Ryan to nudge Chloe to speak up. Chloe seized the chance, claiming their families were interested in the cloud project and wanted to see it for themselves. She mentioned they knew Marcus's aunt was the project lead and asked if Sophie could use their past friendship to secure an introduction. Sophie didn't answer immediately, instead glancing at Marcus as if seeking his silent approval. After a brief exchange of looks, Marcus spoke up, saying that while they'd love to help, his aunt was clearly too busy to be disturbed. The three of them shared a look, realizing this was a polite but firm rejection of their request. Not wanting to cause a scene, they exchanged a few more pleasantries and excused themselves, but Bella remained, staring at Marcus as if she had lost her soul. Marcus ignored her and led Sophie away, yet Bella followed them like a ghost. She followed them from the hall to the second floor and finally into the quiet garden. Seeing they were alone, Sophie turned and asked if Bella had something specific she wanted to say to her husband. Bella snapped out of it, stammering an apology and claiming she'd had too much to drink and lost her way. Sophie let out a cold, soft laugh at the clumsy excuse, warning her that while one moment of confusion is fine, she shouldn't make a habit of it. Sophie reminded her that while Marcus might value old ties, she herself had no connection to Bella's family whatsoever. The underlying threat sent Bella's heart sinking. She knew Sophie's family could make hers vanish from the business world with a single word. Terrified of gambling with her family's future, Bella swallowed her pride and retreated to the hall. Meanwhile, Chloe was already approaching Marcus's aunt, trying to use her connection to Marcus to get a foot in the door. We see Chloe pressing Marcus's aunt, asking if they could at least share a toast. Although Sophie didn't know what had transpired inside, the moment she heard those words, she realized trouble was brewing and hurried through the crowd into the main hall. Before Chloe could even get an apology out, Marcus's aunt picked up the phone to call security. A heavy silence fell over the room as the other guests watched with amused schadenfreude at the four people whose faces had turned deathly pale. The aunt announced that this gala was for the Cloud Project, not a shortcut for favors. She warned the guests that since they had invitations, they should listen to the presentation and avoid underhanded tactics, unless they wanted to be thrown out as well. As a dozen guards escorted the four out, Marcus and Sophie happened to be returning. The couple paused at the entrance to watch the spectacle for a long moment, exchanging a look that was filled with shared, quiet amusement. The host's voice echoed through the hall, signaling that the project meeting was finally beginning. Now that the troublemakers were gone, Marcus had no desire to stay. He sent his aunt a quick message, and Sophie drove them back to the old family estate. The servants had all gone home for the holidays, leaving the large house feeling peaceful and empty. The two of them curled up on the sofa to watch a movie, but as midnight approached, Marcus suddenly found himself craving sweet rice balls. It was late, and every nearby shop and delivery service had already closed for the holiday. Marcus sighed deeply at the unavailable status on his phone, but seeing his disappointed face, Sophie gave him a tender smile and headed into the kitchen. She pulled a bag of glutinous rice flour from the cupboard, and Marcus followed her, his eyes lighting up with surprise. Sophie noticed his curiosity and, realizing he wanted to help, tied an apron around him, suggesting they simply follow a tutorial. It seemed simple enough in theory, so they spent over an hour huddled over a phone screen. Eventually, they managed to knead out a few rice balls of varying sizes and questionable shapes, and Marcus prepared to drop them into the boiling water. Afraid he might burn himself, Sophie took the plate and sent him to get 2 bowls. Since they were out of filling, she added some brown sugar for flavor, and by the time the bowls were ready, the clock had already struck midnight. Marcus scooped up the largest, most misshapen rice ball and showed it off to Sophie, joking that his luck for the year was guaranteed. Sophie watched him with a smile, but the moment he took a bite, his triumphant expression froze for a split second. His eyes darted around as he forced a nod. Then he held the spoon out to her with a mischievous glint, insisting it was delicious. Sophie only needed one look at that plum-sized rice ball to know it was still raw in the middle. And yet, without a moment's hesitation, she leaned down and ate the other half. Marcus could hardly stifle his snicker, quickly covering his face with his hand, but Sophie simply gave him a thumbs up, looking genuinely impressed by the taste. She told him it was sweet, chewy, and exactly to her liking. Marcus tried to peek into her mouth to see if she was lying, but Sophie had already swallowed the evidence. When he finally managed to pry her mouth open and saw nothing, his face fell, realizing she had tricked him into thinking the raw dough was good. The two of them began to play fight, eventually rolling off the sofa and onto the rug together. And so, we leave them there, laughing and enjoying the simple fruits of their late-night labor.